It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
This next one is from Hannah Piano. I don't know if her last name is Piano or not, but that's a really cool name if it's Hannah Piano. And she said, Robert Kiyosaki, in his book, stated rich people have access to investments that are exclusive to them. Is that true? Is this only in the U.S. or everywhere? So, Brian, what's the deal? Do rich people get access to investments that the rest of the world does not have access to?
We've actually done some shows on this, and this is one of those things. I've worked the second firm I worked at. We did a lot of private deals, and that's kind of what Robert's talking about: the access that the rich have to these private deals, the hedge funds, real estate. And look, there are some benefits potentially. And what Robert's talking about is there's what's called accredited investors.
Yep.
And then there's also super accredited investors, or what's known as a qualified purchaser. And what happens with these things, and just to give you a quick definition, you as a normal consumer, the government provides you some protections. You know, there's certain disclosures, transparency, and other things. But the government says, hey, if you're wealthy enough, we're going to give you the ability that if you created wealth, if you have assets like an accredited investor, it's if your income's over $200,000 or you $300,000 for a married couple, and then you have assets over $1 million.
I think that's right. Yep.
The qualified purchaser or the super accredited is like over $5 million. There's a whole nother threshold there, but realize every time you cross that threshold and you start buying into these investments or opportunities that require this, you're actually losing some of your protections or transparency, because if you read, I've done this before, some of these deals out there, if you go read it, it's like the disclosures almost seem like they're daring you
terrifying
to do this, because they're laying out all the ways you could lose your assets, the risks you're taking on, how you could be ripped off or not disclosure, and there's nothing you can do about it. So yes, you have access to those things, but in our research, I think a lot of people, like we work with clients from all different shapes and sizes of wealth, meaning that, you know, from a few $100,000 all the way up to clients who have a $100 million net worth. And I think a lot of you would be shocked to find out that some of the largest holdings outside of like the company that maybe an entrepreneur started, or a company that an executive works at, the largest holding is typically an index fund.
That's right.
I mean, it's so I know there's caveats there, but you don't see people now. Look, I know, because Charles is probably out there. There are real estate deals that can be tremendously valuable, but you have to be careful of who you log in or lock into, and those things. It's going to take a lot. I want you to build some experience, some knowledge before you're willing to shed some of those protections that you get with being a traditional investor.
You know, I think it's really telling that Warren Buffett, who I would argue is the guy who probably has access to any investment he wants. Like if he wants to do a private deal, I don't think anybody's turning him away, right? I think he said, you know, somebody asked him in an interview, this was a couple of years ago, hey, what would you recommend for someone who, if they come into inheritance, like what should they invest in? What's the best thing? I think he said, hey, I just go buy a really low-cost index fund. Me, Warren Buffett, who's made a career of picking companies that are going to outperform forever and do amazing and all that stuff, I'd probably tell the other person that's not me, go buy an index fund. And so I think that's a pretty telling thing. I don't know that just because the wealthy people might have access through accreditation or through their, doesn't mean that's something that necessarily makes the most sense.
Well, take it a step further on Warren Buffett. Look, he does get to buy private companies. That's it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, because he used to disclose in the letter to shareholders, look, if you have a private company, you know, with this criteria, and this criteria, reach out to us and we'll talk to you. But besides the companies he's buying, if you look at his disclosure, if you read the letter to shareholders, he's buying stocks. I mean, he's buying the same stock, you know, the Apples, you know, the Wells Fargos, you know, whether win or lose or draw, the companies he buys, they're all public companies that you and I have access to. You don't see him typically going out and loading up on that hedge fund that private real estate deal. There's probably something to be gleaned from that. So just understand that sometimes sexy sizzle and locking your money up for 10 years is not that much better than what you're giving up with the index funds.